Hello everyone. Tonight we will rediscover the original, ancient and traditional part of our culture that has been covered up. It has been forgotten for centuries, and tonight we will rediscover it. And that is the tradition of seafaring and raiding of our people in the Philippines. To help you understand how this works, let's go back to the class structure. At the very top we have the nobles. At the very top of that, the datu. He's the chieftain and the ruler of his island. In the middle we have the Diwatas, and at the bottom we have the uripos. These are the servants and the slaves. Now the Diwatas serve the datu with their labor, whether it be for diplomatic reasons, for agriculture, or for warrior raiding. The Diwatas serve the datu with their lives in exchange for protection and for the vow that the datu will always try to avenge the lives of the Diwata. So these communities of the datu and his people, along with their allies of datus and their people and datus and their people, once a year would come together for the seasonal raiding trip and form the great fleet called the Abay. Together they would raid their enemies, the other tribes and villages. Why would they raid them? For 3 reasons. Plunder, that money and loot. Slaves, servants, and third, for prestige. Now how do they get this from raiding? Here's how it works. There's a complex raiding law system that was not written with penal codes. Here's how it goes. So during the raids, you can kill anyone you want. You can take any amount of gold or riches that you find. But if someone surrenders, you must take them captive. Because once you've taken them captive, their family will pay you the ransom so that they can have their relative back. If they can't pay it and their allies can't pay it, that person has to be your slave and work off their debt. Now, if you kill the person after they surrender, you have to pay the ransom to their family. And if you can't afford that, you have to be a slave to them until your debt is worked off. This system ensured honor within the raids. Alright, now let's get into the raiding. It all starts with preparation. Okay, so to prepare, the shaman will host a ceremony where the shaman will call upon the spirits, the anitos, the Diwatas, and the ancestors for guidance. Then he'll cast out the teeth of crocodiles and boars and tie knots with ropes. So through the way that the teeth landed and the way that the knots formed on the ropes, the Diwatas, anitos, and ancestors were communicating with them and giving them guidance. Based on these omens, they would plan out how they would conduct the whole raid. This would tell them the outcome of different situations, different battles. And so using these predictions, they would set out a plan of how they were going to conduct the raid. The second part of the preparation is the ritual, the pagdaga. In this ritual, the warriors would capture one of the enemy's people. They would sacrifice them to the gods and smear their blood all over the keel and all over the prow of the boat. Then their head would be stuck on the front of the boat as a display of strength and a sacrifice to the gods. Then the fleet would head out. The fleet consisted of the karakoas. The karakoas are great warships. Ahead of the warships and the smaller boats which are with them is the smaller boat which is in front of the whole fleet. This boat goes in front, and if the boat is destroyed by an enemy fleet, by the other Diwatas who are defending their land, they will send a signal to the fleet, and they will start the boat-on-boat battle. In this battle, the oarsmen on the sides and the warriors would throw javelins, bamboo shafts filled with sand, tipped with poison. They would shoot short-range bows. They would hop on the other boats and fight with krisis and spears. The oarsmen would protect themselves with a deployable cover. This was made of bamboo or nipa. They were able to take it off and throw their spears and put it back up. In addition to this, they had their own shields. Every warship, every karakao had its own landaka, a bronze or brass swivel gun on the front of the ship. This cannon was fired at the other boats. And this battle was so important because it decided whether the raiders were going to be successful and whether the village was going to be destroyed. So if the raiders were able to get through the enemy's boats, they would head for land. And in the village, they would fight off the rest of the defenders. They would take all of the stores of gold, the riches, take as many prisoners as they could, and sometimes the villagers would even burn their own houses to avoid their stuff being taken by the raiders. When all was done and through, those warriors would come back with the plunder and return home. They would return home to the sound of celebration and shouting and chanting. Now at this point, this is when the plunder was all divided. So half of that plunder was given to the shaman because he was the one who predicted and helped with the success of the raid. The other half went to the participants. The majority of that half went to the datus and the chiefs, and a very small portion actually went to the warriors and the oarsmen. So you might be wondering, if the actual warriors who are doing the fighting barely get anything, why are they doing it at all? So let's look at the 3 reasons of why someone would raid. 1. Plunder. 2. Slaves. 3. Prestige. They didn't get that many slaves, they didn't get that much plunder, but they got prestige in the form of tattoos. Upon arriving home, all of the stories of their actions during the raids, their exploits and their bravery were recorded permanently on their skin in the form of tattoos. These tattoos were a source of pride and honor for the people. They showed what kind of person you were, if you were strong or smart or brave. And the more tattoos you had, the braver you were, the better of a warrior you were, and the higher prestige you had. This is why when the Spanish arrived in the Philippines, they called us Los Pintados, the painted ones. Your skin was the tapestry and your tattoos were the stories of your life. Now the reason why this culture of raiding was able to exist is because of the great warships, the karakoas. These were about 80-meter long warships, which despite being a lot bigger than the traditional boats, were sleeker, faster, and stronger. The karakoas had no rudder, and it had no nails either. The way that they built these things were like a bunch of dugout canoes with great outriggers. On these outriggers were a bunch of seats for the warriors and the rowers. Instead of what we find in other European boats where they have big oars like this, instead it's the more traditional oars where it's just men like this on the sides. Because of this, the boats are much lower. This is a strength in some ways because it allows there to be less wind resistance on the hull itself, to easily and quickly transport troops between the islands. But the one disadvantage of this is that when the waters get choppy, the ship gets a droppy. Because the lower boat was more susceptible to being overturned by storms, this is why the raids were seasonal. It had to be during the time when the waters were nice and calm. All of the pieces of the boat were lashed together with strong coconut fiber rope and connected with wooden dowels. This made it strong enough so that upon impact, the whole thing wouldn't just splinter, and instead it would have a little bit of give. On the fronts and the backs of the boat, there are usually elaborate and beautiful colored plumes of feathers from the birds and carvings of serpents and dragons on the front. Because these ships had no rudder, the way that it was steered was by the 2 sets of oarsmen on the side. They would all have to be synchronized in their rowing, and because of this, there were a lot of songs and chants that helped keep the rhythm. Unfortunately, this rich history of seafaring and raiding has been lost, because after the Spanish colonization, they destroyed all of the karakoas, and thus, all of the members of the Diwatas, all of the warriors, were also too reduced to commoners and peasants. Luckily for us, we have the opportunity now to piece together these fragments, to rediscover our culture. And the reason why I'm so happy is because even though this tradition of raiding and warriors are long gone, and there are no more karakoas left, they have ceased to exist, they still do. In our minds, and in the minds of whoever we pass it on to. Because we choose to remember our culture, it continues to live on. So, if you felt just a little bit more enlightened about our history tonight, then go and share the word. Because our people need to know who we are. And this is who we are. In the next episode of Filipino Salad, I'll start talking about the great spiritualities, ancient religions across the different islands in the Philippines. See you later. For now.